Hey guys, today we're going to take a look at how to set up a home surveillance system with just a Raspberry Pi and a webcam. Hey guys, since it's been so long, about a month now, since I've released any content on this channel, I thought we would start getting back into things with something practical and simple, something that might actually be useful for you. And this may be some stuff you've already got laying around the house. And what we're going to do today is actually set up just a simple one-camera surveillance system using a Raspberry Pi and a webcam. So I mentioned one camera here because with MotionEyeOS, you can actually add as many cameras as you want, of course, providing you've got the hardware and that sort of thing to facilitate all of that. But for this setup, for right now, we're just gonna set up one camera. I may make a second video showing how to add additional cameras and alternate ways to install this software to give you a bit more flexibility with how you want to operate your setup. So the first thing we should probably talk about is what we're gonna use for our surveillance system. And we're going to use, in this case, a system called MotionEyeOS. And it's not iOS like Apple, it's just MotionEye, like I with your eye, OS operating system. So it basically, like it says here, it's a Linux distribution that turns a single board computer like a Raspberry Pi or any of the others that are out there into a video surveillance system. Like it says here again, it's built on, or it's based on build root, uses Motion for the back end and MotionEye for the front end. And so one of the things that we got to be careful of when we're doing this is making sure that we download the right image for our particular single board computer. If you've got a Raspberry Pi 2, don't download the Banana Pi image. Make sure you get the right image for your single board computer. If you don't, or if you get the wrong one, it won't work, it won't boot, and you'll have to come back and download this all over again. Luckily, these are pretty small image files at 50 megs or less. So once you download that, you'll end up with, with this file on your computer ending in .xz. You'll just need to extract that so that you get an IMG file. So I've already done all of that, and I've got this folder on my desktop here that's got the Raspberry Pi .img file that we're going to use here, as well as a WPA supplicant file. So inside that WPA supplicant.conf file, we're going to have some basic information here that you'll need to modify to fit your setup. For instance, country, I'm in the US, that's fine. All of the other stuff, these next two lines are fine. You don't probably need to change any of that. You will need to change the SSID. This is going to be for your wireless, whatever your wireless network name is, as well as the password used to log into that wireless network. Now, you don't have to use this WPA supplicant file. This is just in case you want it to automatically connect and you don't have to hook up a mouse and a keyboard and a monitor and do all of that stuff to log in and do this stuff. I recommend downloading this file. I have a link to this in the description so that you can download this, modify it, and put it onto your MicroSD card. But I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, I think, here. The first thing we actually need to do is grab our MicroSD card in my adapter and get that plugged into my USB hub, like so. And then, of course, we'll need some sort of software to move the IMG file over to the MicroSD card. And I like to use Win32 Disk Imager. You can use Rufus or whatever you want to use. I'm just using Win32 Disk Imager for my convenience more than anything. So you can see that it's already recognized the only USB drive I've got plugged in. So I'll go ahead and click on the little blue folder there, go to my desktop, MotionEyeOS, and open up that image, and we'll click right. Yep, I want to go ahead and continue, and this should only take 20-ish seconds to complete. Again, it's only a 50 meg file, and it doesn't take long to get it written to the MicroSD card. And just like that, we're done. So go ahead and click OK, and we'll exit. And I want to pop open a new window here. Oops. Open, click cancel, and I want to go to this PC. We want to make sure that that F drive is still there, and we're going to look for a file structure like this. It should have a kernel.image file, a start.elf, a config.txt. It should look very similar to this. And what we want to do is take our modified WPA supplicant file and just drag it over. And that's it. So we can go ahead and close out all of this stuff. I recommend doing a safe eject here. That's on you. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. And then the next thing that we're going to go ahead and do here is actually set up the Raspberry Pi. We'll get everything plugged in. And I'll go ahead and actually plug into my capture card so you can see the boot up process and what that looks like and some of the things that you'll want to look for. Okay, so I've got my Raspberry Pi. I've got my adapter here. So I'll just go ahead and plug this in like you would expect. I'm also going to plug in an HDMI cable again so that you can see that boot up process. And then I'm going to go ahead and plug in the power. And then we'll switch camera angles so you can actually hopefully see that booting up here in just a second. There we go. And let's put my big dumb face back up there. And here you can see that it says that it's formatting the data partition, which is good. And then it'll go through a few more steps, and then we should see some information that we're going to need here in just a moment. Okay, so it's got our WPA supplicant, that worked. The network is showing us DHCP. Starting our SSH, that's good. Starting MotionEye, that's good. Now we've got an IP address to start working with here. So let's go ahead. Actually, while I'm thinking about it, let's also go ahead and plug in our webcam here. Like so. And then we'll go ahead and just mount this up here as well. That looks about right. Cool. So the one thing that we do want to look at here, you can see that we've got an IP address of 192.168.1.14, and that's what we're going to need to actually move forward here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch camera angles yet again, and I'm going to type in that IP address, 14, like so. And this immediately takes us to our login screen. Our username is admin, and there is no password. You will want to set that up later, though, and we'll cover that here in just a moment. So by default, no cameras are detected. That's fine. We'll go ahead and click the hamburger menu up here, and the drop down, we'll click on Add Camera. And just immediately it recognized our Microsoft Webcam Cinema camera. So go ahead and click OK. And we're going to get a slow, choppy version of me up here. So let's actually move. Oops, not that one. Let's move me down a little bit there. Okay, so up here at the top, you can change how you want the screen to lay out. How many images across do you want? I like to set it at 2, just to make that a little bit bigger, but not huge like that. So I like to do that, and then basically the rest of the preferences here you can ignore, at least for the time being. Under general settings, we've got a few things like advanced settings. We want to turn that on. We'll do that in just a second. But under the admin username and password, you'll want to set those just to make sure that not just anybody can get in here and mess up your configuration. And if you want to give somebody access to just look, you can set up a username and password that lets them look without giving them any kind of access to change any settings. So go ahead and set those to your preferences there. The next thing, like I said, we want to turn on these advanced settings here. And when we do that, we can see which version of MotionEye we're using, which Motion version, which OS version we're using. We can see all of that. We can also do things like backup and restore. So let's say you wanted to deploy several of these, but you just wanted to set it up once. You could set this up, run a backup, download the file, and then deploy that on other devices as well. Very, very handy way to do that. Also, the time zone, I forgot about that. I'm going to go ahead and set this to US Mountain Time, and I'm going to go ahead and click Apply. And of course, it wants to reboot. That's fine. We'll go ahead and let that reboot, and then we'll come right back. All right, so it automatically reloaded the page for me, which is great. It lets you know that it's actually finished rebooting. So I'll just enter my admin username there. And again, we're still pretty choppy here, so let's go ahead and jump into some other settings to make that a little bit better. Your network, you can go in here and you can turn the wireless network on and off if you need to or want to. You can change automatic for DHCP or manual for static if you want to do that. Probably not a bad idea to change that to static, just so you don't have to try to guess where your cameras are on the network. So we'll go ahead and close network services. I like to disable a lot of this. Like, I don't need the FTP server turned on. I don't need the Samba server turned on. I do like to have the SSH server turned on in case I need to just remotely jump in and do something. So that's fine. Under expert settings, I don't really mess with any of this. This is just checking for network settings so that it will possibly reboot if you want it to, if your network goes down, things like that, so that it can continually look for a network connection and make sure that it's running smoothly. I don't ever change anything in here. I think the settings they've got there by default are great. Under the video device, this is the webcam that we're currently looking at. This is camera 1. You can see it says it here. It also kind of says it right here in the bottom left corner there. I like to change this to either the location of the camera or the camera name or what camera I'm using. In this case, I'm just going to call it Microsoft, like so. And automatic brightness, I leave that alone because it tends to go a little wonky and change the look of the image constantly, and it's very hard to watch, so I don't ever change that. But the settings I do like to change here are the video resolution. By default is 320 by 240. I like to jump up to at least 640 by 480. This camera will do 720p, but the more resolution you've got, of course, the more network space, the more hard drive space, things like that. And 640 by 480 looks pretty good. And then the frame rate currently set to 2. That's why this looks so choppy. I like to turn it up. You know, some people are good with 10. I'm not good with 10, so I like to set it to 30. And then I like to click apply. And of course, it's going to reboot again here. It's not going to reboot every time you change a setting on the device. There's just certain settings that it has to reboot to get those things to kick in. So unfortunately, changing the time zone is one of them. Also changing the resolution and frame speed are also things that will cause it to need to reboot. But again, the page will reload once it's finished rebooting. So we'll just kind of hang out for a second while it does that, and then we'll log back in. And now, again, it's still not, you know, super crystal clear, but it's much faster, much more fluid, and you're gonna have just a better overall result here. So we can go ahead and minimize, close out some of this stuff. We've already looked at the video device. That's where we just were. So the next thing we might want to look at here is file storage, and this one's actually kind of neat. You can set it to store everything locally if you'd like, but because I want to be able to have access to this no matter what, no matter where I'm at, from my phone, from a computer, a remote location, whatever, I like to upload my media files, and you've got some options here as well. You can say I only want to upload pictures, I only want to upload the video files. You can choose from an FTP server or an SFTP server, Google Drive or Dropbox. Those are the defaults that are in here. I'm a big fan of using Google Drive. So I'm going to go ahead and set that. We've got to give it a folder name, someplace on your Google Drive to store everything. And I've just got a folder on there called Security Camera, like so. And we want to include subfolders, that's fine. And in order for this to actually connect, what we'll have to do is obtain a key. So we'll click that. It's going to ask which email address I want to connect with. We're going to go ahead and select that. We'll click Allow. And then we'll get our key. We'll close that. And then we'll paste that key in there. And we'll click on Test Service. And it should say that it connected. Yep. Accessing the service was succeeded, so that's good. You can also do things like calling a webhook or run a command. I don't ever deal with any of that. This is sufficient for me, but if you wanted to call a webhook, you absolutely could. You can do a get or a post, whatever you need to do there. Or if you want to run a command, you can do that as well. But for right now, I'll go ahead and click Apply. And we shouldn't have to reboot this time just because of the change we made there. So that's all there is under file storage. I like that they've got some ability to upload to the cloud for remote access from anywhere. Then under, let's see, file storage, we can go to the text overlay. We can change things around. If we wanted the, the timestamp in the bottom left corner, we could do that. I like having the camera name down the bottom left, the time and date in the bottom right. That all works really well for me. So we can move on to video streaming. Again, I always set this to 30%. The higher you set your streaming quality, the better it's going to look, obviously, but the more system resources it will take on your Raspberry Pi. So this is set at about 80, which is fine. Your streaming port by default is set to 8081, and the reason that is there is so that you can just access that stream directly without having to log in to the admin panel. And you can either have it make you log in to view it or not. I've got this disabled, but just to kind of show you what that might look like. If I do 192, let's do 14, oops, and then 8081. So automatically it's just showing me the stream, and I didn't have to log in or any of that kind of thing. So that's what it's useful for. If you wanted to make somebody log in, you could, and that's what the authentication mode there is for. Motion optimization is it will stream at a lower frame rate by default, unless it notices motion, and then it will pick up and go to your 30 frames. I like to leave motion optimization off. I want it to stream as close to real time as possible at 30 frames, so I just leave motion optimization off. Streaming URL, snapshot URL, these are, like they say here, useful URLs. So like the streaming URL we were just at, so we can just copy, we can click go to, and just immediately it jumps over to that. So that's what those are there for. So we'll go ahead and minimize that. We can move on to still images. I like to have still images on. Just because it can snap a picture and take a video. Capture mode I like to set to 1 picture. If you set it to motion triggered, it'll take a ton of pictures, and that gets pretty tedious when you're sorting through your media files. Preserve pictures. This is great if you're storing locally. You can have it set for a day, a week, a month, a year, whatever. Because I'm setting this to upload everything, preserve pictures doesn't really matter, but I'll set it for 1 month. And it's going to throw up an error saying, hey, this will remove any media that's in this folder, even if this software didn't create it. So that's all that is. Movies, same thing, basically. And you can change what you want your file names to be by year, month, day, hour, minute, second. Same thing with movies and pictures for that. In my initial testing under movies, by default it's set to H264, which should be fine, but I noticed that it wasn't actually saving or finishing any of my videos, so I've switched it to AVI, and I've had much better results with that. But again, here for the video quality, I want to crank that up. Recording mode, also motion triggered. If you do continuous recording, it will do exactly that, and it'll take up all of your system resources, your drive space, your network. It'll take up a lot of that, so I like to just have it motion triggered. Maximum movie length, 0 is for let it record as long as it needs to. Or you can split it up into like 30 seconds or a minute or however many seconds you want. And then again, for preserving videos, you can say day, week, month, year, forever, custom, whatever. Again, because I'm uploading all of this to the cloud, this doesn't necessarily matter, but I'll go ahead and say a month. It's going to say, hey, anything in this particular folder, we're going to delete after a month. Even if it wasn't created by the software. Again, same thing as with the images there. And what's, I guess, because I keep mentioning this this cloud storage thing, maybe I should jump into that as a good segue into motion detection. If we go into my Google Drive here, you can see that I've had this up basically since the 26th of December, and in here you can see all of the different video files that it's taken and that sort of thing. But if I come over to, let's look at like a couple of days ago on the 7th, just in this example, you'll see there's a lot of what appear to be empty frames here. That might have actually been triggered by a cat. Most likely that was triggered by a cat. Yeah, little ears poking up there may have done that. But you can see. You can see how it's got everything listed out here. Like here's the wife and kid leaving the other morning, and as soon as he walked out, it started recording. And then they got off the porch and walked away, and that's all it needed to record, but it showed me that there was somebody there. You know, if we look at it also snapped a picture of somebody on my porch. That's of course my wife. So you'll notice there's a lot of stuff in here that probably wasn't necessary. And we can actually avoid some of those unnecessary false positives by going into motion detection and changing the frame change threshold. Right now it's at 2.8% or 2.6%, I guess. The higher up you drag that slider, the more the frame will have to change before it recognizes motion. So setting it to 10 is probably a good starting point, depending on how much data you want to record. So that's definitely something to play with, depending on how much, again, you want to record. So definitely play with that and figure out what works best for you. Auto noise detection. So like if it detects noise in the frame, it should be able to detect that and realize, oh, that's not real motion, and not worry about it. Light switch detection, I like to leave disabled. You can turn the sensitivity up there as much or as little as you want. 0 is just there's no detection there. It's just not even on. The detection isn't enabled there, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Motion gap, the number of seconds of silence to mark the end of a motion event. This one, I've had mixed results with. I haven't really changed this. I've always left it at 30 seconds, but I've had it end much sooner than that, like you just saw when my wife and son left. So, you know, some things are still a bit finicky, but it's stuff to play with to get dialed in for your preferences. And if you're ever not sure what any of these settings are, you can just hover over the little circle there with the question mark, and it'll tell you. So that's pretty much all I mess with under motion detection. Under motion notifications, you can actually have it do things like send an email or run a webhook or a command or any of that kind of stuff. When you do have the email turned on, which I'm a big fan of, it'll blow up your email. Every time there's a motion, you'll get an email. So it works. It lets you know by which camera, which is good. So there's definitely some good stuff there. I might set up an additional email account that you can ignore if you need to. Or, of course, you can adjust your motion detection threshold there as well if you're getting too many emails. But you just fill in the blanks here for your email address and your SMTP server and things like that. Click test. Once it's set up and working, you know, you'll start getting stuff that looks a lot like this. And I guess the other thing here is the working schedule. If you want it to turn on and off during certain times of the day, you can do that. Which I really dig. You know, you can say Monday, Wednesday, and Friday only be these hours, or whatever the case may be. You can do that. I always turn the working schedule off. I just want it to record anytime it needs to, anytime it sees that there's motion, I want it to record. And of course, anytime you're done making all of your settings, be sure to click the apply button, and then you should be good to go. So that's really all there is to setting up a simple one-camera surveillance system using a Raspberry Pi and a webcam. Of course, there are ways to add additional cameras, whether that's plugging directly in or setting up additional Raspberry Pis or even Raspberry Pi Zeros as additional access points for more cameras. And I plan on making a second video showing how to do that, but I felt it was important to get kind of the rudimentary, like initial setup done so that we can then later jump into adding additional cameras in either of those other methods. So hopefully you found the video helpful or entertaining, or maybe gave you an idea for a project to do around your house. If any of this was helpful or informative or any of that stuff, it'd be really cool if you would leave a thumbs up on the video. If you're new to the channel and you're interested in how-to videos like this, be sure to subscribe. I've got more content coming very soon. And I think that pretty much wraps up this video. Of course, if you've got questions, comments, ideas, thoughts, you noticed I screwed something up, leave all of that in the comment section down below, and I will be sure to answer as quickly as I possibly can. But I think that's going to go ahead and wrap up this video. As always, thanks for your time. I always appreciate your support, and I'll talk to you in the next video.